this is Jennifer Pyank with A Crocheted Simplicity, and in this video tutorial I'm going to teach you how to crochet the reversible knit look ribbing. I've always been a fan of slip stitch crochet because I can't knit, so I'm always on the hunt for stitches that resemble knitting or techniques. This technique uses slip stitch crochet, and I know some of you may be grumbling and maybe frustrated in the past with slip stitch crochet, but in this video tutorial I'm going to share with you a bunch of tips and tricks to make your life a little easier and hopefully make you successful at this technique. One of the great things about the reversible knit look ribbing is that it is so stretchy, super stretchy. So it's great for projects such as for cuffs on sleeves or ribbing at the bottom of a sweater, also for bands on a hat. And it's the same on both sides, so that's why I said it is reversible. Okay, I myself made myself a washcloth, so I ended up chaining 24. So I had a usable project when we're done. I'm using a cotton yarn, again because I'm making a washcloth, a 5mm crochet hook, and you'll also need a couple of stitch markers. I don't use them anymore because I'm used to this technique, but for beginners, if you've never worked slip stitch crochet before, these are great little tools to help you keep your place. So we're going to start with a couple of quick tips about slip stitch crochet. One of the biggest things that can cause your tension to be too tight with slip stitch crochet is having to pull your yarn directly from the ball or the skein that you're working from. So what I like to do is have a small pile sitting next to me or on my lap so that I'm not pulling and creating that extra tension. This will allow my natural tension to come through more in my stitches and my gauge won't be so tight. Another thing is that I don't wrap my working yarn around my fingers when I work slip stitch crochet, because even wrapping them around loosely, you can still cause your tension to be a little tighter when working slip stitches. So I'm going to make a swatch, a small swatch, not going to chain 24, I'm going to chain 12, just so I can show you the ins and outs of this stitch. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Now I'm going to work into the back humps of the foundation chain, shown here. I like to work in the back humps of the foundation chain because then on the bottom edge of my project I have a nice finished edge that will resemble the top edge when we complete the stitches. So we're going to slip stitch into the back hump. So you're going to insert your hook, yarn over, pull a loop through and pull it right through that loop on your hook. No hesitations. Sometimes if you insert your hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, and then you stop. Oops. See, I'm used to not stopping. Pull up a loop and then you stop. This can also affect your tension with slip stitch crochet. So you really should try to do it in one swooping motion. Insert your hook into that next stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, and pull it right through the loop on your hook. This is something that does take a little time to get used to, but the more you work this stitch, the easier it will become. You'll be working this stitch faster than you can work single crochet stitches or chains. Now, another thing when working this slip stitches is you want to make sure that your tension is controlled. You may find that you need to work a little looser than you work normal stitches. Just make sure that the V's from the top of your slip stitches are the same size as the stitches you're working into. Okay, now the reason I use stitch markers is to mark the first and last stitches of my row. So let's go back and I'll show you how I work those if needed. Okay, so insert your hook into that first stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, pull through the loop on your hook to complete the slip stitch, and then insert a stitch marker into that first stitch. Now by doing this, when we come back around on the next row, we get to the end of the next row, we'll be able to locate where we need to work our last stitch. Okay, so then slip stitch into each chain across. See how I don't hold my working yarn, I just let it lay on my fingers. Just use my fingers as a guide. You don't want to hold or place any tension on that. It'll naturally cause your stitches to tighten up. Okay, now that I've worked that last stitch, I'm going to place a stitch marker into the last stitch as well. And this, when we turn our work, we'll be able to easily see where we need to begin our next row. Now, when working slip stitch crochet, some people prefer to do a turning chain. They chain one and turn, and some people prefer not to. I prefer to use a turning chain, but make sure that you make it a tight one. Sometimes the turning chains, if they're too loose, they can make your edge appear really sloppy. So to make it tight, before you work your turning chain, tug on your working yarn a little bit. This is the only time I'm going to tell you to tug on your working yarn. But tug on your working yarn a little bit. It tightens up the loop on your hook before you make that turning chain. So make that turning chain, go ahead and turn. And now the knit look ribbing is worked all in the back loops only from here on out. So you're going to slip stitch in the back loops only for this row and the next row and all the remaining rows. So it's pretty simple. So we locate our stitch marker. And you see the V that's created by the top of the stitch. We locate that back loop. So we're going to insert our hook into that back loop. I'm going to remove my stitch marker first. Insert our hook into the back loop, yarn over, pull up a loop and pull it right through that loop on your hook to complete that first slip stitch. So you go ahead and repeat all the way across. Keep your tension nice and loose. You may work a little looser than normal, but you want to make sure that your slip stitches are the same size, the same width as any other stitch you work. A slip stitch is just like a regular stitch, like a single crochet or a half double crochet or a double crochet, except for it's shorter. So it's still the same kind of stitch. So you want to make sure it's the same width. Now we're at the last stitch. So our last stitch marker shows us where to work this last stitch. Remove that. And work one more slip stitch. Okay, now I'm going to tug gently on my working yarn to tighten that up so my turning chain is nice and neat. Create my turning chain and turn. You can see a little bit of the ribbing forming. So now tip your work forward. Just identify the V or the top of the stitches, and you can easily find the back loop. And then you simply slip stitch into the back loop of each stitch across. Remember to work one swooping motion. It'll keep your stitches the correct tension they need to be. Okay, when you get to the end of the row, I'm going to gently tug on the working yarn before working my turning chain. Chain one and turn. And again, work in the back loops only. Now if you get to where you go to work in the back loops and you have a hard time inserting your hook into that stitch, that means that you're working too tightly. Your hook should easily be able to fit into those stitches with no problems. You should not be a forced thing at all. So if it is forced, or you're finding you're having a hard time getting your hook into the stitches, that means you need to loosen up a little bit. You maybe even need to go up a hook size. Okay, so for the reversible knit look ribbing, you simply continue on working in the back loops only of every stitch across. Chain one, turn, and repeat. Back loops only, slip stitch in each stitch across. That's all there is to working this stitch. So I made my dishcloth by chaining 24, working into the second chain from my hook in each chain across, so I have 23 stitches. And then I simply repeated that row, working in the back loops only, until my dishcloth was the size that I liked. This is one of my favorite stitches for ribbing for the bands of a hat because it's so stretchy and nice and it likes to hug the head really well. And it also goes back to the shape it was in. It doesn't stretch out as easily as a lot of crochet stitches do. So you can see here, let me stretch it out, it's super stretchy, but you can see the ribs. They resemble knit ribbing. All right. Now you can go ahead and complete your project, complete your dishcloth, and then you have something usable for your kitchen or a frog. But don't be afraid to do slip stitch crochet. It really is easy, and once you find your groove, you'll be doing it in your sleep. So if you have any questions for me, feel free to comment on this video or comment on my blog post, or send me an email by using the contact form at the bottom of my blog page. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Have a great day.